Hello, today it's a tale of two different international relationships. Relations between the UK and the EU look like they're getting closer, and we'll have an update on what's going on there and why. But relations between India and Pakistan, following the terrorist attack in Indian-administered Kashmir earlier this week, they are deteriorating fast. We'll discuss both those important situations on this episode of the BBC's daily news podcast, Newscast. Hello, it's Adam in the Newscast studio, and shortly we're going to be talking about the deteriorating situation between India and Pakistan following that terrorist attack in Indian-administered Kashmir, which claimed 26 lives on Tuesday. But first of all, we're going to talk about the relationship between the UK and the EU. Ursula von der Leyen, the President of the European Commission, was in London today, mainly for an international energy summit that the UK was co-hosting. But on the side, she also managed to lay a bit more groundwork for this UK-EU summit that's going to take place next month, where we all think both sides are going to unveil a new stage in the UK-EU relationship, because British officials and European officials have been beavering away for a couple of months now to deliver Labour's election pledge of a closer relationship with the EU, not replicating membership of the EU, but just shaving off some of the edges of the relationship that resulted after Brexit. And there's a lot of speculation today about what's known in the jargon as youth mobility. Some people call it free movement for young people. It's not really that. It's a scheme that would allow young European citizens to come to the UK and vice versa. And it seems like it's potentially going to be one of the big bits of the negotiations. So why has it become suddenly more important? And why are people talking about it more today? Well, Chris is still here and he can tell us why.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Before we dig into any details, or kind of, I suppose they're proto-details at the moment, aren't they? Why is there such a sort of increasingly loud drumbeat about UK-EU relations at the moment? Where are we in the calendar?
So in the calendar, we are now a handful of weeks away from a UK-EU summit that is happening in the UK next month. And the sort of backstory to that is the government talking about having this quote-unquote reset with the European Union, but up until now, a limited amount of sort of meat upon those bones. And then what we've had today is this letter from 60-odd Labour MPs and some peers as well, sent to Nick Thomas-Symonds, who's the minister who's in charge of the negotiations with the European Union, basically talking about closer collaboration on defence, and then some of the things that Labour promised in its manifesto about reducing border checks around our good old friends' sanitary and phytosanitary measures. This is all to do with food and meat exports, and then crucially in this context, this idea from these Labour parliamentarians for what they describe as a new and bespoke youth visa scheme for UK and EU citizens aged under 30.
Yeah, so that brings us on to what I was describing as the proto-details, because it's all quite sketchy. But there are some things we can say for definite here, which is that a while ago, the EU offered what it called a youth mobility scheme, which was 18 to 30-year-olds from any EU country being able to come to the UK, study, work for up to 2 years, and also crucially pay the same rate of tuition fees at British universities as home students. Now, at the time, there was a Conservative government. They totally rejected that. Mm-hmm. But at the time, the Labour opposition also totally rejected that.
They did. So this was in April of last year. So it was coming in what was pretty much guaranteed to be a general election year in the UK. And as it turns out, was coming weeks before said election was going to be called. And I know from speaking to various diplomats from different European Union member states, quite a few of them who are keen, very keen on a youth mobility scheme, were hopping mad with the Commission for putting this out at what they felt was a very politically naive time, where you were pretty much guaranteeing that not only the Conservatives as the incumbent government, but Labour as the likely next government would feel it was politically expedient to reject it, which is exactly what happened. The Commission wanted, as you say, 18 to 30s, 4 years, not limited by purpose, equal treatment on tuition fees for university, no quota in terms of the numbers, and that the UK healthcare surcharge, which is something that is paid by plenty who come into the country, which is £776 per year, would not apply. So that's where the Commission was a year ago. The government's talked for a while about it having no plans for a youth mobility scheme. You have very tortured conversations with all sorts of people about this, about what it might be called, and probably any language that hints at travel or movement will probably not feature as and when something happens. So mobility scheme, youth, movement and freedom will probably be banished from the lexicon of how this is described. And then there's a debate and a discussion going on and a negotiation going on about, well, what about those crucial details? What is the age limit? For how long? For what purpose? What about tuition fees? What about a quota? What about the health surcharge? So all of that into the mix, alongside defence and fish and plenty of other things besides, as to how you describe what this reset amounts to, as opposed to it just being a aspiration.
But the intriguing thing that happened today, alongside this letter landing from all these Labour types, putting lots of pressure on the government to sign up to something like this, was that actually at the Downing Street lobby briefing, when the Prime Minister's official spokesman or spokesperson talks to journalists at Westminster today, the government line shifted subtly from no, we're not going to do this, to, oh, we're not going to talk about whether we're doing this or not. That's a shift. That is a shift.
It is, and it had an extra little layer of glorious Westminster kind of complexity / farce / cock up to it, which was that the aforementioned Nick Thomas-Symonds, the minister, was in the Commons this morning, and he did say there were no plans. But Downing Street said something subtly different, and I am pointed in the direction of that being the Downing Street thing, being the thing that we should lean upon. And the no plans thing might just about still wash, because, as I say, goodness knows what name this particular thing has as and when it emerges out of the process. The reason I mentioned, over and above the fact that I think it was an interesting thing to mention, the view of European capitals and the view of the European Commission, is that they really, really want something like this, does the EU. So in the context of a conversation about defence collaboration and fish and goodness knows what else, all the stuff about sanitary and phytosanitary, of your binders from many years ago, and Brexit cast, etc., is that, you know, in a negotiation there's going to have to be wax and wane on various things, and I think it is looking increasingly likely that something that amounts to allowing younger people to spend some time in other European countries, and some of their younger people spending time here, badged as it may be, and goodness knows what language, is going to happen.
And on those other issues of defence and fish, from reading things and reading between the lines of other things, it seems the issue there is with defence is like, okay, the EU has long wanted to have a defence and security pact with the UK outside of NATO. Like, that was Michel Barnier's dream to have that as part of the Brexit deal. The previous Conservative governments always rejected it and looked towards NATO instead. But actually now Keir Starmer is keen to do a deal along those lines, and also that would crucially give the UK access to this huge, big, new European defence fund, this massive pile of billions of euros that has been set up in response to the uncertainty about America's defence commitment to European defence.
Exactly. And so I think what we're going to get, in the way that all of this is packaged up and sold, certainly from a UK political perspective, is that, look, this is no longer about the old arguments. Not only is this a new government that's going to be around for a while in the UK, but look at how the world has changed, particularly on defence. And so that is then into the mix for exactly the reasons that you set out, alongside something around youth mobility, with, the balancing act that the government has to strike, which is a lot of its MPs, as per this letter today, and plenty of Labour supporters, but certainly not all, might be quite encouraged by the idea of a closer relationship with the EU. But there will be others, and loud voices, who, and we've actually heard it from Kemi Badenoch, the Conservative leader, this afternoon, whose instinct is one of that any, as they might see it, slippage back towards closer harmony on however you describe it, with the European Union, is to somehow, dilute the essence of Brexit. And Labour will be very well aware of that critique, reasonable or not as it might be, depending on what comes out of these negotiations in terms of how they sell. Particularly the youth mobility thing, because they will fall over themselves, and the European Commission has been falling over itself for over a year now to say it is not freedom of movement. And in many senses, that is a reasonable thing to say, because it won't be that. It won't be freedom, and it'll be restricted in all sorts of ways. But it is going to be, it would appear, a more liberal regime as far as the movement of people is concerned, even if they are very tightly defined, in an era where the government has also got a promise to deal with and get down levels of net migration.
And the other word you said was fish, and it seems to me the issue there is, at the moment, under the Brexit trade deal, there are annual negotiations about how you divvy up fish between British fishermen and European fishermen, but within a sort of multi-year
Fishers.
of envelope. Fisher people, within a multi-year envelope where like the amount that European boats are allowed to catch sort of goes down. And it seems to me the action is about what do you replace that with, and is it something where you don't have negotiations as regularly as every year, and do you do something about the levels at which the European share of the catch and the UK share of the catch stabilise at? That's from my reading of various newspapers.
I'm struck by a sort of theatre of the mind, which is fish in an envelope, and then a splash of nostalgia, which is like a Brexit cast episode all over again.
And I should just say, that's all third hand from reading various reports. That's not from European diplomats whispering things into my ear in a bar with small beers. Anyway, right, Chris, thank you very much.
Ta-ra.
Oh, I think we're going to reunite soon to do a special look ahead to the local elections.
Yeah, and actually, come to think of it, I've actually got, as of last night, a folder for that purpose. For the local elections. So I'm channeling my inner Fleming. In the next edition of Newscast.
I mean, I've just gone paperless now. But
Have you? Oh,
miss the old ways.
Just when I thought I'd kind of caught up with the zeitgeist, the story of my life has actually just gone over the horizon.
Chris, thank you very much.
Cheers.
Now, let's focus on the situation between India and Pakistan. There's been a series of tit-for-tat diplomatic manoeuvres, for example, chucking out each other's diplomats and pausing a big international agreement between the two as a result of the terrorist attack in Indian-administered Kashmir, which happened on Tuesday and killed 26 tourists. Because even though many people will think of Kashmir as a kind of disputed region between India and Pakistan, in the last few decades, it's become a real kind of tourist hotspot. But why has it now become the centre, again, of a huge bit of geopolitical tension between two nuclear-armed powers? Well, I've got two of my BBC colleagues who are experts in the region who can help us untangle all of this and learn a bit more. Joining us down the line is Anbarasan Ethirajan, who is the South Asia Regional Editor for BBC News. Hello, Anbarasan.
Hello there.
And we're also joined from Delhi by Shruti Menon, who's a senior journalist with BBC Verify there. Hello, Shruti.
Hi Adam.
Anbarasan, just give us the latest about what we know about this attack that happened a couple of days ago, or what we think we know.
Well, this brutal attack happened in Indian-administered Kashmir, in one of the very famous tourist spots. Kashmir region is in the northern part of India, which is bordering Pakistan. Now, a group of tourists, this is the peak tourist season, they went to a meadow in a place called Pahalgam. And all of a sudden, a few gunmen appeared from the woods, and they shot at many of the civilians, mainly separating men from women and children. So they were targeting these tourists, and according to official sources, around 26 people were killed and several others were injured. This is a remote area because to reach this beauty spot, you have to trek for about 30 minutes or go on a pony. And that's why it is slightly away from the main route. And by the time the help came, it was too late. It took for a couple of hours for people to come down to the main road, coming back on the pony, some were carried on shoulders. And that has really shaken entire India. It is triggering a lot of dismay and anger. Now, subsequent to this attack, because this is a very rare attack on tourists, because Kashmir attracts millions of tourists from all across India, even though there have been some gun attacks and militancy-related violence, that didn't stop tourists from flocking to this, one of the most beautiful spots in the region. It has got meadows, streams, and snow-capped mountains. And this also has history because this Kashmir region is claimed by both Pakistan and in India in its entirety, but they don't control in entirety, they control only in parts.
Yeah, and we'll talk about the geopolitical significance of the area in a second. But Shruti, the internet and social media is full of quite graphic footage of the aftermath of the attack, some of which is real and some of which is fake.
Yeah, so that's what I've been monitoring. I've been looking at footage being shared related to this incident. So there's, like you mentioned, footage that we have verified. Verify has worked on and geolocated, where you can see traumatic scenes, really graphic scenes of children and women and men running around across a meadow, as you can hear gunshots in the background. And then there are these false, unrelated videos and images with false claims that they are related to this particular incident, which claim to show, one of them claims to show a picture of one of the gunmen, alleged gunmen, in the image, which has also been extensively shared by the mainstream media. Some of them have deleted it now, but they have shared it with the claim that this is exclusive footage or first image of one of the gunmen who shot at the tourists in Pahalgam. So we've been working extensively at sifting facts from falsehoods.
Anbarasan, why is it that the Indian authorities are linking this so conclusively with Pakistan?
Now, there has been a long-running insurgency. Anti-India rebels have been fighting against Indian forces for decades now. There have been different groups. But in the last 10 years or so, the insurgency has waned. Security forces have taken several actions, several operations eliminating them. And India has long accused Pakistan of supporting and arming these rebels. And the accusation has been that they are being allowed to come from Pakistan across the border into Kashmir to carry out these attacks. And Islamabad has strongly denied these accusations, and they say that they offer moral and diplomatic support to the Kashmiri people. The Kashmir itself, you have to understand, one part is with Pakistan, one part is with India. And there is a very anti-India sentiment within the Kashmir region held by India, administered by India, because some people want independence for the entire Kashmir region, and some people want to join with Pakistan, and there is a group which wants to stay with India. So it has become a diplomatic tension and military tension between these two countries, and they have fought 3 wars since independence from Britain in 1947. And so there are 3 wars over Kashmir, and thousands of people have been killed over the years. So this is, once again, this Kashmir issue has raised a huge amount of tension between the two countries.
And Anbarasan, how is that tension playing out in terms of things that the Indian and the Pakistani government are doing aimed at each other?
Now, soon after this attack happened, several senior Indian leaders, they visited the Kashmir region and they held a cabinet meeting, and they came out with certain decisions, for example, like suspending a key water treaty between India and Pakistan. So the Indus River Water Treaty, the water flows from India into Pakistan. So they have an agreement over sharing of water resources. And they've also made some people persona non grata from the Pakistani High Commission, basically expelling them from the country. And they also closed one of the key borders. That means the trade through the borders and people-to-people movement that has been stopped. So these are some of the measures taken by India. And Pakistan has responded by saying, they are also suspending trade and stopping giving visas to Indian nationals, and also closing its airspace for Indian carriers, Indian airlines or Indian-operated airlines. And they've also warned that any attempt to stop the water flowing into the Indus River could be seen as an act of war. So both countries have announced tit-for-tat measures which are likely to have ramifications, but still we don't know yet whether there will be any sort of military action by India or by Pakistan.
And I'm intrigued about this whole water agreement, which was signed back in the 60s and was kind of like a landmark bit of cooperation between two countries that were real enemies. Why has that been selected as the thing that gets switched off in this kind of diplomatic dispute?
This has been one key agreement that has stood, all the wars and major conflicts, seen as some kind of stability. This was brokered by the World Bank, negotiated by the World Bank, because water is a key component in the region. Because these countries like India, Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, you have these rivers flowing between various countries, and water is very important for the agrarian communities, for example, Pakistan or Bangladesh or India. Now, according to this agreement, certain amount of water has to be released into the Punjab province. Mainly it goes into the Punjab province of Pakistan, which is the agrarian belt, real lifeline of the Pakistani agriculture community. So any attempt to stop the water will have serious ramifications for Pakistani agriculture. That is the livelihood of tens of millions of people. That will really strangle Pakistan. But even if India wants to stop the water, or it's only suspending the agreement, it has not really cancelled it. So we have to understand the difference. They can always rejoin. But some experts are pointing out if they really want to stop the water, that's not possible now because you have to build a lot of dams, a lot of lakes. It is only sending a symbolic and political message. We are not happy and we can go to this extent.
And Shruti, I mean, there's always been tension playing out on social media between India and Pakistan and Indian and Pakistani users of social media. Has that, I'm guessing that has escalated in the last couple of days.
Oh, yes, definitely. There are trends that are being pushed from handles that are based in India, and there are counter trends that are being pushed by handles that are based in Pakistan. And on both sides, one of the things that myself and my colleagues at Verify have been noticing is the use of AI-generated images. So, for instance, an AI-generated image that shows bodies lying about in the meadow and there's blood somewhere in the background. There are a couple of those kind of AI-generated images, and you can look at them and you can clearly see that those are not from the real incident. And by looking at the background and the mountains in the background, you can tell that they're not from the original image, from the original incident. But what we have come to understand, or what I have come to understand, is that a lot of this is being done to generate engagement with those trends on both sides, which means that the more people will see these things, the more people will engage with it, the more traction it will get, and the wider audience it will get.
Anbarasan, you mentioned the idea of the prospect of military conflict, which, I mean, is a sort of ever-present threat in that region and has been for decades. What is a sensible way of thinking about that prospect at this point with this level of tension, and bearing in mind they're both nuclear armed powers, and so people can maybe get a little bit kind of dramatic about that?
So it has happened before. As I said, there were 3 wars, one in 48 and 65 and 99 over Kashmir. Between the third one was a limited conflict focused only on one region of Kashmir. But in the past, for example, in 2019, when Indian paramilitary soldiers were attacked, dozens of them were killed, then India, what it called, carried out surgical strikes against what it called militant hideouts inside Pakistani territory. So that escalated tensions, and then one Indian Air Force jet was shot a couple of days later. A pilot was captured by Pakistan, and later on he was released on goodwill, and then later on international community intervened and the tensions reduced. But both countries are aware that there is a possibility of a limited escalation, but no one will know how this will escalate, given that both are nuclear armed rivals. And even a limited conflict can really escalate within a short span of time using Air Force or even using commando forces, how this will end. That's what both the countries do not know, and that's why they are even hesitating. In fact, whoever is starting it, and then the other side will be forced to respond. Don't forget, there is a strong, whipped up public emotion on both sides. For example, if you watch the Indian media for the last 24, 36 hours, it is all about, what India should be doing, how India should be responding. So you raise this public expectation, and then the government will be finding it difficult not to act. That is the danger here. So can you control this escalation? Both sides do not know where this will end up. On the other side, because of this historic rivalry, the Pakistanis also, they are prepared now, thinking, what happened in 2019, and again it happened in 2016, that was a ground operation limited. So they will be prepared, and even the public will be coming together, supporting their own government and the army against any what they term as aggression by India. So it is a very dangerous situation, given that both are nuclear armed rivals, and they know that they cannot go beyond a threshold. And that is why the international community's reaction is important, given that what is happening in the US with the President Trump's administration about tariff wars between different countries, and their attention is slightly diverted from what's happening in the global arena. Otherwise, US will always intervene or negotiate or mediate to bring the situation under control. Now, we don't know how far the Trump administration is really focused on what's happening in South Asia at the moment.
Well, Anbarasan, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And Shruti, thanks for monitoring all that stuff online for us and checking it all out.
Thank you.
And that's all for this episode of Newscast. Thank you very much to everyone who's been on it, and thanks to you for listening. We'll be back with another one very soon, which I have a suspicious feeling will be our preview of the local elections happening in England next week. Bye-bye.